The last train left a moan in its wake, a lonely whistle echoing down the valley like the cry of something left behind. The station was barely a building, just weather-beaten boards nailed to one another with more memory than purpose. The wind dragged dust in lazy circles across the platform, tugging at the hem of a woman's coat. She stood frozen there, suitcase in hand, her eyes wide but not seeing. Emma Rose Callahan was 24 and hollow in the way only the recently unmoored can be. Her dress, though simple, bore the neatness of upbringing, pressed cotton, a collar still starched, buttons done all the way to her throat like a vow she hadn't broken yet. But the dirt of the train's journey had claimed her cuffs, and her shoes were not made for dust roads. She looked like she had stepped out of a life she didn't belong to, and perhaps that was the truth of it. She didn't cry right away. She held it in with tight lips and clenched hands and a spine drawn too straight. Then, just as the last of the passengers scattered and the engine hissed like it was glad to be rid of her, she sank to the bench and whispered a single word. Help. It wasn't meant for anyone, but someone heard. Leaning against the hitching post, a man watched her with the sort of stillness that made animals uneasy. His coat was worn in all the right places, dust caked in the creases of his boots, and a brim of shadow veiled his eyes. He had the kind of silence around him that wasn't empty, but full. The kind of silence that used to have voices in it. You lookin' for trouble or runnin' from it? Emma startled, clutching her suitcase tighter. She didn't answer. Her eyes flicked toward the road beyond the station, then back to the man who hadn't moved an inch. Most folks come through here wantin' to disappear, he said, finally pushing off the post. You just want to be seen. He stepped into the sunlight then, and his face came clear, rough-hewn and tired, with a grief so etched into his expression it had turned gentle. Name's Wesley Boone Carter. I got a ranch half a mile north. I ain't lookin' for anything. But you look like someone who don't need to be alone tonight. The invitation was simple. Not a rescue. Just a rope thrown across a distance she could choose to cross. She didn't move. But the wind picked up, and with it came something like memory, or maybe hope. Emma stood. The ride to the ranch was quiet. His truck coughed on every bump but held together like stubbornness tends to. Emma stared out the window, watching how the prairie tilted under the sunset, like the sky was bowing to kiss the earth. You from here? He asked. No. Got people waiting? No. He didn't ask more. That, too, was kindness. The ranch was small but dignified, with a fence that leaned but didn't fall and a porch light that flickered as if it was trying. He led her to the front steps and opened the door like it wasn't his but belonged to anyone who needed it. You can have the room at the end of the hall. I'll be up early with the horses. Why are you doing this? She asked. Her voice cracked, unfamiliar even to her. Wesley scratched his jaw. 'Cause once someone did it for me. Inside, the house smelled of pine wood and old paper. A framed photo sat on a mantel, two faces smiling. A woman with chestnut hair and a child with the same eyes. Emma paused there, fingers grazing the edge of the frame. Wesley noticed. My wife. And our boy. I'm sorry. He nodded. Me too. At dinner they didn't speak. Not really. He slid her a plate and sat opposite, chewing methodically. She noticed he still sat 3 places. Habit, maybe. Maybe something deeper. She didn't ask. That night, sleep came to her like a thief. She lay staring at the ceiling, counting the spaces between floorboard creaks, until moonlight poured in like spilled milk. In the morning, the ranch hummed with chores. Wesley was already out with the horses, sleeves rolled and sweat catching on his brow. Emma watched from the porch, uncertain where to place herself in a world that moved without her. You don't have to stay, he said when she wandered over, brushing dust from her skirt. I know. Then why are you still here? Emma looked at her hands. Because I don't know where else to go. And because you don't look at me like I'm broken. He paused, leaning against the barn wall. You ain't broken. Just not put back together yet. Her laugh was soft, surprised. That's almost poetic. I read once, he said with a shrug. Used to be I liked words. They fed the horses in silence after that, but it was a different kind of quiet. Not the one of strangers. The one where breath lines up and the moment holds. In town, it was different. The general store went quiet when Emma walked in. She felt eyes rake across her back, not with desire, but with that awful curiosity small towns breed like dust. That her? Someone whispered. The one he brought in? She cried at the station like a child. She's not his wife. Emma stiffened. She didn't look up. Just paid for the soap and sugar and walked out like the whispers hadn't cut into her ribs. Wesley said nothing when she climbed into the truck beside him, but he reached across the gearshift and rested a hand lightly on her wrist. That night she baked a pie. It burned on the edges and the crust sagged in the center, but she placed it on the table with the defiance of someone trying. He took one bite and nearly choked. They laughed until the lantern light blurred with tears neither of them admitted. I never learned, she said. They didn't want me to know anything but hymns and pleasantries. I reckon pie was never salvation, Wesley replied. But it's closer than most sermons. She caught him looking at her then, not the way men look when they want something, but the way people look when they find something they thought lost. The following morning, she found his wife's journal by mistake, tucked under a loose floorboard. The temptation to open it was sharp, but instead, she brought it to him, silent. He took it in both hands and looked at her as if she'd passed a test he hadn't meant to give. She wrote about the sky a lot, he said. Said it made her feel like she wasn't small, just part of something too big to understand. Emma smiled. She sounds like someone I would have liked. She would have liked you, too. It was only then that she realized how deep she had already stepped into this quiet life. Days turned to weeks. The sun rose and set in gentler ways. She learned to ride with shaky knees, Wesley's hands on hers, his breath steady near her ear. When she finally stayed upright through a gallop, he grinned so wide she saw the boy he must have been. Then came the letter. It arrived folded in half, addressed in a hand that made her stomach turn. Her fiancé, or whatever name she could give the man her father had promised her to. He was coming. The lawman, Marshal Braddock, found Wesley the next morning. You're not her kin, he warned. And you've got no claim. Best not get tangled in what isn't yours. Wesley's jaw set like stone. She's not a parcel, Clyde. Then let her fight her own battles. Wesley knew then that the past never truly left. It just rode slower. Emma stood at the edge of town that evening, eyes locked on the horizon. She didn't shake. Not this time. Inside the saloon, she stepped up to the little stage where no one sang anymore. She didn't ask permission. Just began to speak. I came here afraid, she said. Not just of a man, but of what people would say if I stopped doing what was expected. I was a preacher's daughter. A pawn. A whisper in someone else's sermon. But I am not ashamed. I did not run away. I ran toward something. Silence fell like dust on still air. And in that silence, Wesley walked through the door. When her fiancé arrived, it was in a hiss of train steam and arrogance. He strode up to her with confidence borrowed from a lifetime of control. Come now, Emma, he said. You've made your point. Enough foolishness. She didn't move. He reached for her arm. A shadow fell between them. Wesley. No gun. No threats. Just presence. You're done here, he said, voice low. You don't own her story no more. The man faltered. Just enough. Emma stepped back. Then beside Wesley. You're coming with me, he said. Not a command, not even a request. Just the truth of it. She nodded. They rode out the next morning. The hills rolled soft under pink skies, and the prairie was blooming in wildflowers like it had forgiven something. Emma leaned into Wesley, her head resting against his shoulder. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Because love, sometimes, doesn't arrive in grand declarations. Sometimes it's a coat offered in silence. A burned pie. A hand on your back when the whole world's looking away. Somewhere far behind them, the train station sat quiet again. And somewhere ahead, there was a place where no one whispered about the girl who cried at the station. Only about the woman who found her voice on a horse at dawn. Because some stories don't start with love. They start with help. And end with a ride into the rising sun.